I read a lot of books, and almost all of them are nonfiction and fall into the self-help or personal development genre. Many of them are for the Bookworm podcast that I do with my friend Corey Hickson, where we talk about a different productivity book every 2 weeks. But a lot of others I read just because I enjoy learning new things and wrestling with big ideas. Altogether, I read just shy of 40 productivity books this year. And in this video, I'm going to share what I consider to be the 8 best books of 2024. Now, all these books are new and were released within the last year. So these aren't the best books that I read. These are the cream of the crop for the books that were released in 2024. I've read all of these personally from cover to cover, and I have a mind map of notes for each book that I'll cover. I've got a separate video where I walk through how I actually take those notes on books that I read, but I mention it here just because I bundled all those notes up and I've made them available as a download for free. I'll share the URL at the end, but let's jump in and go through the books first. The 8th best book of 2024 is Meditations for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. This is another great book from Oliver Burkeman, the author of 4,000 Weeks, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And that book was my introduction to the concept of memento mori, which I did a whole video on, which you can view here. This book is a little different in that it's formatted as a 1-month daily reader, which is great for someone who wants to digest the message in bite-sized bits, but it's not great for the Bookworm podcast where we covered it. There's some really great ideas in here, including the concept of viewing your read it later pile as a river, not a bucket, which actually inspired a whole new reading workflow for me that I wrote about in my newsletter here. His witty, lighthearted style is a breath of fresh air for the productivity or self-help genre, in my opinion, and this is a very good book. The 7th best book of 2024 is Right Thing, Right Now by Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday is one of my favorite authors, and his latest book in this Stoic Virtue series might just be his best book yet. This is the 3rd book in that series, and it covers the virtue of justice, which interestingly meant that Ryan thought it would sell the least out of all those books in the series, but has so far sold the most of any of those books. I love how this book is formatted into short, concise chapters that focus on a single idea related to the virtue of justice. Ryan is a great writer, a phenomenal storyteller, and he sprinkles in lots of historical anecdotes from people whose lives illustrate the virtues that he's writing about. Not a lot of action items for me from this one, but definitely a lot to chew on. The 6th best book of 2024 is Never Play It Safe by Chase Jarvis. This is a new book by Chase Jarvis, who is the author of Creative Calling, which I really enjoyed. And Chase has had an interesting journey, which adds a lot of validity to his message, in my opinion. Now, not everyone's gonna love this book, since he basically is saying to stop conforming to society's standards and to go do your own thing. But personally, I think this is something a lot of people, including me from a couple of years ago, really need to hear. I really like Chase's writing style, and I feel like we're sort of kindred spirits in a lot of ways. For example, he talks in the book about the difference between a map and a compass, something that I write and talk about all the time. I've never actually met Chase, but I feel like we would probably be friends. If you want a book to help you think differently about your future, this is it. Lots of great advice and practical tips for empowering people to go design the life that they want to live. The 5th best book of 2024 is Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. Now, technically, this book was published just before 2024. Ali Abdaal is a doctor turned YouTuber and a Bookworm listener who has a huge YouTube channel and talks a lot about productivity and systems. What's unique about this book is that it doesn't give you a formula to follow. Instead, it tries to get you to think about what your work could be like if it was fun. He includes a bunch of experiments that you can run to find out what really works for you, but he's not going to tell you just follow this system, which I think is a very good thing. Now, I have to admit that I was a little bit skeptical about this book based on the title. Feels a little bit clickbaity to me. But this book is very good. It's not your standard productivity book, and there's a lot of good ideas in here that just might transform the way that you work. The 4th best book of 2024 is Good Work by Paul Millard. Paul's previous book, The Pathless Path, played a large part in me deciding to quit my job and go independent as a full-time creator. And honestly, I've been slightly mad at him ever since, at least until the Life HQ launch, which happened right before I read this book. Now, for context, Life HQ is my epic done-for-you Obsidian vault, and that launch was a tipping point for me in my creator business. That was really the first time that I had the confidence that I was really gonna make it. Prior to that, it was easy for me to get excited about Paul's message, but it always came with a little bit of skepticism about whether that would really work for me. But having gone through the process now, I believe now more than ever, Paul is right on the money with this. But even if you don't want to walk away from your day job, this is a great book about doing work that really matters. Life is more than cranking widgets, as we like to say in the Focus podcast, and this book will help you infuse your day-to-day with meaning and purpose, but it will likely challenge your status quo first, so be forewarned. The third best book of 2024 is Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. I love pretty much everything Cal Newport does, including the Deep Life podcast that I really got into this year. But I was not a huge fan of this book when I first read it. Now, to be fair, I did think that it was good, but I think I undervalued some of the ideas that Cal talks about in this book when I first read it. However, the more distance I get from this book, the more I realize that the impact those ideas have really had on me. Now, this book can be summarized in a simple formula. It is a systems book that teaches you a system for slow productivity. Do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. Now, Cal is a great storyteller, and he shares some great narratives alongside his usual in-depth research on the topic as a university professor, but I believe that there's a lot in the detail and the nuance here as he unpacks these slow productivity principles. For example, the pull versus push idea for work tasks that I believe has the potential to revolutionize the way that teams work together. So this book wasn't quite what I expected, but I do think it's very important, and just about anyone could benefit from reading it. The second best book of 2024 is A System for Writing by Bob Dotto. This book was the biggest surprise for me of everything I read in 2024. I was familiar with the idea of Zettelkasten, but it never really clicked for me. I didn't really like it, and honestly, I kind of wrote it off. It seemed to me to be an overly complex way for people to try to pump out boring writing regularly. But Bob is a really good writer, and he addresses that argument directly in the book. He even mentions that Niklas Luhmann, the creator of the Zettelkasten method, is praised for his productivity, not the quality of his writing. And fortunately, Bob explains clearly and concisely in this book that there's more to writing than just spewing words, and more importantly, he gives practical examples of how you can use the principles of Zettelkasten to improve both the quantity and the quality of your writing. So for PKM nerds, I believe this is a must read. Even if you've completely written off Zettelkasten as not for you, there's a lot of gold nuggets here that I'm confident will help make you a better writer. And finally, my best book of 2024, Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. I suggested this book to Corey for Bookworm because he wanted to read a book on AI, but honestly, I wasn't looking forward to this one. Most books on AI are either too old to be relevant for the current AI moment that we find ourselves in, or they're too tactical in my opinion, and they try to explain how to use technology that will be completely different by next week. But this book is neither. Instead, it's a philosophical manual for how we should approach AI from someone who truly understands not only where we're at from a technical standpoint, but how we should approach the tools that are available to us. Most of the conversation about AI that I hear online drives me crazy because it tends to be towards one of two extremes. Either people think AI is taking over and it's coming for our jobs, or it's garbage and it will never do anything really useful. And every time I hear one of these perspectives, I want to yell at my podcast player because it's clear to me the person talking really needs to read this book. AI is something we need to pay attention to because it's not going to go away anytime soon, but it's also not something we need to be afraid of. And Ethan Mollick does a great job in this book of explaining how to stay curious and discover the ways that AI can augment our current productivity and creativity workflows. I wholeheartedly believe this is the blueprint if you want to better leverage AI for yourself, and it should be required reading for anyone who wants to understand the topic better. In many ways, that's all of us. 2024 was in many ways the year of AI, and this is the single book, in my opinion, that you should read on the topic. All right, so there you have it, the 8 best books of 2024. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I've got mind map notes for all of these. You can download those mind map notes for free when you go to download.mikeschmitz.com/2024-books. I also share a different mind map from a book that I read recently in my newsletter, which goes out every week along with an original essay on something PKM related and a link to something cool that usually has to do with Obsidian. The newsletter goes out every Monday morning and you can sign up for it for free by going to practicalpkm.com. I also mentioned the Bookworm podcast a few times in this video, and if you like my take on productivity books, you might dig that podcast too. New episodes are released every other Friday, and you can check out the podcast by going to bookworm.fm. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.